Hey guys, and you are guys. God damn boys, look at us.
Hey, look at us.
Look at us.
Huh?
Who would have thought?
Not me.
Just a bunch of body type A's hanging around having a good time. Anyway, today we're going to go over Sony's terrible decisions of late, including of course their latest corporate report showing that they've pretty much dove headfirst into more DEI initiatives, even at a time where other similar companies like Microsoft and Square Enix have started taking some short steps backward. If you like these kinds of videos, please don't forget to drop a like and subscribe to the channel for more going forward. And if you have any suggestions or stuff that you'd like to see, let me know in the comments. Without further ado, let's jump in. So, Sony, whether we like it or not, totally dominated the last console generation. I still remember being a fresh-faced little fuck with barely any facial hair watching Angry Joe videos back in 2013, following all of Microsoft's blunders with the Xbox One, such as trying to force the Kinect onto every Xbox purchases to the point of telling people that the console would not function without it, before backtracking on that awful decision eventually. I also remember the drama with DRM related types of things where you wouldn't be able to share your video game discs with your friends or sell them. Sony used all of these blunders to fuel their momentum. They even made a troll video showing how game sharing worked on PS4 by having two dudes, I think one of them was even Shuhei Yoshida, handing a video game to one another. Which is actually pretty ironic because then with the PS5 they were the ones overcomplicating things by separating PS4 and PS5 versions of games in their stores, which they also misused to lock PS4 players out of PlayStation Plus offers. Meanwhile, on the Xbox Series consoles they had that smart delivery feature that just automated everything. But at least at the start of the generation, everything was looking really great and like there was this total connection between Sony and their audiences, what made them excited, what they wanted to see, etc. Even as a happy owner of an Xbox 360, I was totally persuaded into making the switch to a PS4 and getting to all of these exclusives that I had missed out on. And so it was. PlayStation came out of the gate with a promising future taking shape pretty soon, only getting better and better as the years went on, with new IPs such as Bloodborne, The Order 1886, Horizon Zero Dawn, God of War, in this new genre at least, Spider-Man, Days Gone, Death Stranding, and of course Ghost of Tsushima, as well as very promising sequels like the infamous Second Son, Uncharted 4, and then later on at the end of the generation, Horizon Forbidden West, God of War Ragnarok, and Spider-Man Miles Morales. Furthermore, in between there were some other very exciting games that came in and out, for example Persona 5, Neo, Nier Automata, and even Final Fantasy VII Remake. While I have my own separate likes and dislikes for each one of these games, it is very obvious that PlayStation was on one hell of a roll, taking risks by starting new IPs and keeping their players very happy by maintaining a very high standard of quality and consistency, and an unshakable focus that quite literally pleased the crowd, please us, the gamers, the paying customers. Whenever these games were presented or talked about in interviews, we didn't hear any bullshit about how dedicated and focused the team was on diversity and inclusion, or in responsibly representing quote-unquote marginalized minorities. They could have stood on a soapbox and went on about how important it is for women to see a female leading an action-adventure game like Horizon and having her own agency and all this other crap that some of these morons say these days to pretend like they're the first feature characters who aren't straight white males. But they didn't do any of this, they kinda just showed the game off. They focused on the robot dinosaurs, their size and toughness, and on the hunter-based combat system with bows, rope casters and traps that we would have to carefully use in order to take down these big beasts. And even in the game itself, we were shown a female character with her own agency, highly capable in combat, honed through years of training, with a badass father figure with a mysterious past. We were shown a woman with a fiery temper and attitude, and a sound and logical mind that called out not just injustice, but also people's stupidity in worshipping things that in her mind did not exist. We were shown these qualities throughout the game rather than being told that she is the toughest, bestest huntress around, without a single shred of training footage. And we were also shown vulnerability, which provides a path for character growth. These are the types of things that some modern female protagonists lack, as it is unfit to show women as weaker or inferior, and especially not with a tough and able male paternal figure. We were shown her intelligence rather than being told that she's the smartest woman in the room. And these are some of the reasons why this game worked so damn well, and why this female protagonist was well liked. And the director at the time, Herman Holst, would also speak of the risk taken in starting a new action-adventure IP rather than just making another Killzone. For both Spider-Man and God of War, there was nothing but the gameplay too, and very excited dudes constantly hyped, talking about the game. I still remember how excited Brian Intihar, the director at the time, felt every time that he gave interviews talking about Spider-Man. Just an excited, nerdy dude, so happy and so proud of having the privilege to work on the Spider-Man game, and giving it his best shot along with the rest of the team. And for God of War, it was Cory Barlog, not just excited but also extremely fucking nervous. It was endearing to see this guy care so much about what he was doing, and then when he saw the reception and broke down crying because of not knowing whether or not his direction of telling a story about a father and a son would be appreciated, we ended up appreciating him even more. For Days Gone, they focused on showing off the hordes, masses of zombies on screen in the hundreds, and on talking about bikes, and how much they actually love to ride them as well in real life, and wanted to have that biker lifestyle focus put into the game in this apocalyptic setting. Days Gone wasn't as well received as the other games that Sony made, but it got a lot more recognition in recent years than it did at launch. Sony canned the sequel because at this time Sony was only interested in blockbusters that hit the same numbers as God of War and Spider-Man, which is a damn shame. I never heard any more news about this studio again. I hope they've not been relegated to boring backup work. They told one hell of a story, and to leap from making PSP games to making Days Gone was impressive nonetheless, even if the game itself was not innovative or anything like that. Not every game really needs to be innovative. Sometimes you just need a good, simple game, a game that does what it does well. I think this year, more than ever, has shown that with Black Myth Wukong and Space Marines 2 getting such a positive reception. I have no idea where all of these dudes went. It's like they all disappeared into corporate positions and never got behind game development again. Now games aren't even pushed with this kind of passion anymore. It's just a robot voice announcing them on the State of Play stream. All of these games were unapologetically made with nothing but the fun factor in mind. They were not interested in pandering to people who were not a part of their communities, and much less interested in getting into fucking political nonsense. Being able to get home from work and switch off from the world outside, from all the dramas of politics, elections and other bullshit, was easy, because the games were made with the express intent to please the players, to give them immersion and fun, rather than being used as vehicles for political propaganda and far-left ideology agendas. When you have an established brand with a solid fan base, with a proven demographic that already likes your content, then what you do in terms of sequels or certain genres is appeal to that demographic. The problem with these shitty AAA Western studios right now is that they're failing to do that. When they look at their demographic and they see that it skews more towards the male side, they clutch their pearls and take it upon themselves to change that as if it was a fucking problem to have a mostly male demographic.
Ew!
When there is no such problem at all when it's a mostly female demographic.
Yes, yes.
There was no weird obsession with gender, sexuality or race as a driving force of these decisions, but now there is, and it's completely destroying this industry. And another problem of theirs is their continuous brainless decisions to hire more and more activists to work in these studios, in accordance to discriminatory and insane diversity quotas, thus replacing proven talented developers hired based on merit, knowledge, passion and experience with DEI hires who often have nothing to offer. I've made a video focused on this topic. I go over this kind of stuff in detail. It's a little bit long, but it is what it is. It goes over how harmful DEI is not just to these businesses but to society in general. Check it out if you're interested. This is the kind of thing that just keeps exposing itself as a terrible decision. Just look at, for example, the current situation going on with Godot. I'm sure many of you have already seen some buzz about how a deranged far-left activist, DEI hire, took the company hostage, shitting on their very own financial supporters and even banning them, blocking all sorts of their customers from using their engine. This person isn't even a higher-ups, it was just a community manager, and yet look at the amount of damage they've been able to do before getting fired. And that's if They even got fired because, as of the recording of this video, their situation remains the same. These people are in incredibly privileged and protected positions within these companies. They are literally afraid of firing them or treating them like regular employees. It's the same kind of thing that happened with Helldivers 2 this year. This game was on fire, so many players having a blast, so much content online. I mean, Jesus, every time I went to take a shit I had a new YouTube notification about Helldivers 2. And then all of this fell apart, partly because of insane community managers turning it into a furry kink fest, and partly thanks to Sony's PSN account restrictions. And you can find this kind of infestation happening across Disney's Star Wars and Disney's MCU as well. And in my last video I mentioned Cleopatra as an example of something else. It serves as an example of this too. These are ideologically driven products, and ideologically driven products usually come from ideologically driven people, rather than the nerdy, passionate and talented people who brought us those amazing games at the height of the PS4 generation. I don't know how the fuck we got to the point that we're at right now, where these narcissists were given this much power through fear of the cancel culture, but it's time to wake up, guys. The cancel culture is only as real as you make it. If you ignore these people and their ridiculous screeching, there is literally nothing that will happen to you, because at the very least 90% of the population is not fucked in the head, and I'm already being super generous by giving them 10%. Majority of people in this world are not offended by every little thing. They are not Karens who want to cancel everything and everyone. Sadly though, in these companies it's never just one either. The very decisions of hiring these kinds of people are very deliberate and often accompanied by other ideologically similar decisions or hires that follow an agenda, and Sony's corporate report for 2024 is very concerning. Let's read a couple of lines here. Sony aims to be an organization where diverse personalities, opinions, views and values coexist. This is fine. To help further the advance of diversity in the Sony group, Sony has set a new numeric targets and is working to raise the percentage of women and non-Japanese nationals as a proportion of Sony Group Corporation executives to more than 30% respectively by 2030. This is not good. It's fine if you want to foster a friendly environment for anyone that may come into your company from whatever background, whatever religion, whatever, but it's not good if you're trying to focus on hiring people based on their race, gender, religions, backgrounds, sexualities, etc. This is not a good thing. You want to hire people who know what they're doing. That should be your #1 priority. And you should not be discriminating who you're hiring based on gender, sex, or anything else that they cannot control about themselves. As long as you're doing these two things, what is the problem? Why do we need more? Why do we need diversity quotas? We believe that innovation happens when we embrace the diversity in each other beyond boundaries. The Sony Group will continue to evolve as a place where everyone belongs and demonstrates their individuality, inspiring an inclusive society. Respectfully, I've gotta ask, what the fuck are you talking about? What is all this nonsense injected into what should be a work environment where people should simply work? All you have to do is follow the damn train of not being racist or sexist in your workplace, of treating your employees with respect and not condoning crunch culture within your studios. All of this reads like a complete nonsense. Oh, it all sounds great to the ears, but once you apply your brain to it, it falls apart as corporates speak for, yes, we are going hard after that ESG money, even if it means losing sight of ourselves and neglecting game development as nothing but a stepping stone for far-left ideologies like Marxism. Then the rest here just reinforces these things. I'll leave it on the screen for anyone who wants to read, but basically what it comes down to is that Sony only has about 30% female workforce and wants to increase that number artificially through initiatives like DEI and other similar programs. They also want to increase the number of women majoring in sciences and engineering in Japan. You guys can make your own assumptions out of it. Personally, I don't see anything good in this at all. Just a lot of virtue signaling language covering up the fact that this is far left ideologies at their best. Some deep-seated Marxist shit going on here that refuses to acknowledge the natural and inherent differences between men and women. And the basic facts that men are naturally inclined towards some things, some forms of entertainment, some vocations, etc., and women are inclined towards others. This ideology sees, like, for example, men watching Dragon Ball Z and girls watching High School Musical, and it interprets it as a problem. Not for High School Musical though, just for Dragon Ball Z. That's the Western spin that we give it over here, where we just hate to see men having a good time and want to take everything away from them that brings them joy. So they create these avenues with shit like ESG and DEI to influence these companies and studios to essentially change Dragon Ball Z into a pile of garbage that nobody wants to watch, not even the women. Nobody except the 1% of deluded narcissists want to see it. So then these projects just fail because all they managed to do in the end was push away their core audience while appealing to nobody else. Even this hypothetical 1% of deluded narcissists do not watch it. They just react positively to social media posts about it because they love to see their little regressive ideology winning and taking over yet another franchise. But they're not really interested in interacting with them because they were never interested in the IP in the first place. They were never interested in Dragon Ball. This is why Disney is in the shit right now. Nobody is watching their trash. The Acolyte was an embarrassment, and now Agatha all along is shaping up to be even worse with lower audience numbers. Fans of Star Wars wanted to watch Star Wars, not this bastardized garbage that they keep churning out. That 1% showed up for the Acolyte, but it wasn't enough. So why do these people keep focusing on them when making new shows and movies and games? How many more flops until they learn? And this matter brings us to the fabled modern audience. Some people like to say that they don't exist. The truth is they actually do, they're just brutally insignificant in these major mainstream spaces and franchises. They're like a minority of another minority. And this bothers them so much. This is the bane of their existence after all. It's the one thing that is leading towards all of these quote-unquote woke disasters. The truth is that there is a place in gaming and entertainment spaces for these types of games and shows to be made and to appeal to certain different demographics that include the fabled modern audience. It's just that it's naturally a smaller space for games and other media of far smaller budgets. So for example, if you play your cards right, if you have a budget and a target audience that makes sense and you still put in the work to present compelling characters in interesting manners, write worthwhile stories and design detailed settings, you can create the most diverse and inclusive game possible and still find your niche market to be successful. Very successful even. Again, I bring up Life is Strange as an example of this. I genuinely love that first and second game. They are as modern audience as they get, except without overbearing the players with fake disingenuous political garbage, and instead just focusing on telling good, emotionally charged stories, like the good old Telltale games. These games fill certain niches within the gaming market and are actually quite successful. It's like the cozy game market. There's so many games on this genre and style. Some of them are massive, like for example Stardew Valley. But activists in these studios and consultant companies and DEI departments are not interested in these niches at all. They're not interested in appealing to their audiences. They're not interested in carving their own little spaces and catering to a community of their own. Their interest is purely ideological. They want to disrupt the gaming space. This is why we call them activists rather than game developers, because they're not in it to develop games, foster communities and make a profit. They're in it to push ideologies, divide communities and do it all with someone else's money, fully aware and perfectly okay with losing that money. Because for these talentless lying freaks, it was never about finding their place in the industry to tell their personal stories and whatever. It was always about takeover and indoctrination. They know that if they just start new IPs with this kind of thing, very little people will care. It will not have the impact that it has, and the industry will just carry on just fine as it is. These are not the results that they want. They want their personal, political, and ideological leanings and concepts to be force-fed to massive audiences. They don't want them to be neglected and ignored. They want them to be noticed. And most of all, they want to disrupt what they call the status quo, because they genuinely hate this medium, and especially they hate us for refusing to consume the garbage that they want to pump our games with. They are narcissists who hate the fact that they are not the center of everyone's universe. And they know that if they don't inject themselves into the mainstream market through these big AAA publishers and studios, they would never even have their existence acknowledged by the wider gaming audience, which is perfectly demonstrable by the fact that before they started negatively impacting big AAA games with weird shit that didn't fit, nobody even knew the name Sweet Baby Inc. This pisses them off because it acknowledges a very important detail, that people like them are minorities, in the sense of the word that they are the numeric minority of the people in the world. They love classifying themselves as marginalized minorities while maintaining a headcanon that there's actually way more of them than there are of normal people like us who just want to live their lives and not obsessed with their own gender or sexual identities.
Some people are really fucking stupid.
That's what I mean when I say that they're a minority of another minority, because they're minorities even within their minority groups, and the more radical and intrusive they become, the more support they keep losing. In the AAA gaming space, where games are extremely expensive to make, the target demographics are mainly dudes and chicks who just want to get immersed exploring massive fantasy worlds that provide true escapism from our reality, and have fun with high-octane combat systems, interacting with interesting, well-written characters put into truly fantastical and extraordinary situations. Which means they want to play as big buff fucking gods slaying beasts and other gods in a violent mythological land of high fantasy. And they want to play as a fiery redhead huntress exploring the vastness of a post-apocalyptic tribal future hunting big fucking metal dinosaurs. And play as the Ghost of Tsushima, a fallen samurai with an unbending power of will who refused to die and didn't rest until every Mongol was driven out of his homeland. Or as Spider-Man, swinging through the skylines of New York City on the hunt for the Sinister Six while trying to avert a total viral disaster. And the last thing that they want is to get their games injected with immersion-breaking political bullshit that does not belong there, and that pop right off the screen to lecture them with morality lessons that they don't need nor want to begin with. And they could care less about their reasonings for it too. Once upon a time we would hear words like diversity, inclusion and representation for poor marginalized minorities, and we let it be and tolerated it. But that time is long past. All of this tolerance has only led to these activists becoming bolder and more overt with the shit that they pump into our media and society as a whole. The truth is that they played themselves by going so hard with this stuff that they pissed everyone off, even the moderates and the progressives who are waking up to all of this terrible media and asking what the fuck is going on. And that's just the media. I'm not even going to talk about in the politics space. Some of the things that these people push are absolutely insane. But even then, despite all the warning signs, despite the $400 million loss on Concord and other problems, like for example the fact that Spider-Man 2, a 23-hour game, cost them $315 million to make. It was so expensive that despite it selling well, it barely made a profit. Despite the fact that one look across the pond to see Disney's constant flops, Sony still learned nothing and believed firmly that their flagship titles and overpriced consoles will continue to sell like hotcakes even when they double down on all of this DEI shit. I know that on a certain scale, so far, we haven't seen something unplayable from Sony. Forbidden West had a random trans character in some side quest that you may not even have seen. Don't ask me how they transitioned, by the way, I have no fucking clue how they did it. In a world without magic or technology or, medical surgery, don't ask questions, just consume product. However, aside from this trans character, everything was fine. Some people say that there's too many women in power. I think they're just choosing to look for these problems in this game. I have my own fair share of complaints in terms of cringe here and there, but it was nothing abusive or overbearing enough for me to be able to call it out like, hey, what the fuck is this? Such as I did with Spider-Man 2. We'll get into it in a second. God of War Ragnarok was a fantastic game to me. I really loved it. I genuinely had a great time. Everything was on point for me. Gritty, violent gameplay, high stakes story, fantastic acting. I was so happy to see OP from Sons of Anarchy playing Thor. He fucking nailed it. I was on the edge of my seat the entire time. The only thing Sweet Baby Inc. impacted here was making Angrboda and their family black. Both of these games were in 2022, by the way. I'm not joking when I say that their garbage becomes more and more bold as time goes by. Because up next was Spider-Man 2, and in this game the injections and the loss of quality were much more noticeable. They took Miles Morales and relegated his side missions to total baby bullshit, like collecting stolen instruments to then open up a museum dedicated to black people in music. Nothing against adding culture to a video game, I even learned some things in that museum in regards to jazz and hip-hop. But this was long before the game abruptly ended in a mere 23 hours, and I realized that why is this in a Spider-Man game? Why is this taking up space and time in an already short game that should have been spending as much time as possible developing these two Spider-Man? Seriously, this game is shorter than the first one and has double the characters to flesh out. And if that wasn't enough, he also had another 2 or 3 separate side missions at his college, helping lazy-ass students with their homework. Their homework! You had to swing around campus calibrating drones and shit, except for this other guy who wanted to ask another guy out to prom. Again, why is this the content that you are relegating Miles' character to? Why do you believe that we as players of your Spider-Man game want to be swinging around, helping cringy-ass zoomers, and then setting up a date for 2 dudes? Like, never mind the fact that they're gay, which is another one of those things where it's like, hey, check it out guys, we got gay representation in our video game. Like, never mind that. The fact that you're setting up a fucking date for 2 NPCs in a Spider-Man game, a short Spider-Man game that needs to spend as much time as possible nurturing this fucking character, specifically Miles, specifically since he's going to be the protagonist going forward, and you spend that time with this content. It just doesn't make any sense. And as if that wasn't enough, then let's not forget how much importance they gave Haley, Miles' deaf girlfriend, who was even given a whole ass article about how important her animations were. We literally have a game here that improved the traversal mechanics to such a huge degree that it made for loads of amazing videos online from people showing off their precise swinging and gliding skills. But the most important aspect of animation, according to Insomniac and gaming journalists, was Haley, of course. Sure. In this short game, they gave her a whole ass mission where you spent like 40 minutes walking around a construction site, covering up graffiti with your own better graffiti. It had environmental puzzles to get you up to a roof where you could find the culprit and then invite her to join your art activist group.
You serious?
This trite added nothing to the story. It added nothing to the character, and it took up precious valuable time in a game that was already way too short. I completed it with the platinum in 23 hours, and I'm a leisure player. I take forever to finish games. That's how short this was. There was no reason to throw this in there except for more pointless diversity and inclusion and representation nonsense that we do not want in our games. My own mother suffers from visual and hearing impairment. I care deeply about this shit, but what the fuck is the inclusion and enforcement of me playing as Haley in my Spider-Man game going to help my mother hear better, or help me deal with the realities of having a parent with these difficulties? And then, like I said, they proudly present that Peter Parker is retiring, and now the next games will focus on Miles Morales as the main Spider-Man. So, the character that they relegated to grabbing instruments for a museum, for helping lazy dumb college kids with their homework, and for fucking around with a depthless deaf character instead of, oh I don't know, establishing a connection to important villains like Green Goblin or Dr. Octavius and maybe some other new ones, this is the character that they're going to make the main protagonist going forward. Brilliant decision making, Insomniac. Bravo. Thank you so much for handing over like fucking half of the narrative control of your own story over to Sweet Baby Inc. Thank you for saving me my money on their next installment. And why is this becoming a thing, by the way? From Last of Us 1 to Last of Us 2, we get Joel replaced with Abby. From Ragnarok to the next God of War game, we're likely going to be playing as Atreus as well, since the boy went off on his own journey that we are likely to follow. From Ratchet and Clank, we went to this new female rat person. Even the kids' games are getting hit with this shit. From Peter Parker and stealth missions with MJ, we're now going to have Miles stealth sections with fucking Dumbo over here. And of course, we have Jin Sakai to Atsu. And then people get mad at me in comment sections for pointing out these patterns. Like, stop flashing the patterns in front of me and I'll stop pointing them out. I have no interest in making shit up. I have no interest in purposefully denigrating the hype that I have for a video game. I want to be hyped for these games. I was hyped for them during the last generation. I want to be hyped for their sequels. I am deeply invested in several of these franchises. I want them to be good, and I don't want to keep getting this bait and switch treatment. Needless to say, all of this stuff makes me more and more concerned for Ghost of Yotai. It makes it harder and harder to believe that the radical left-wing activist actress is just a coincidence. It looks more like a deliberate choice, and I can say that I am legitimately worried for the integrity of this game, as well as pretty much everything that is going to be coming out of Sony's Western studios. I know that we can still expect good stuff here and there, like for example, Stellar Blade was great, Rise of the Ronin is fully focused on its action gameplay, no DEI nonsense there either. We also have Death Stranding 2 around the corner, which we can already see from afar the stark contrast in the female characters with absolutely perfect 3D scans. But as far as Naughty Dog, Insomniac, Santa Monica and Sucker Punch go, shit is not looking good for the foreseeable future. It looks like Sony will require some hard financial knocks in order to snap themselves out of this path. It's just sad. These studios, headed by far better people at Sony, built up their entire brand throughout the last generation through truly impressive and commendable work, and now they're having all their hard work, all the goodwill that they built up, and all of their integrity as studios committed to quality completely botched in the name of a terrible ideology that is not only destructive to entertainment but regressive to society. Like, holy fuck, man, it's not even for a good cause. There is nothing redeemable in any of this. It's like those core values are gone. All of this passion and desire to appeal and put on the show for their fans and customers left the chat. It's like appealing to the majority male demographic is some kind of ugly thing now, and like connecting with fans in general became something that Sony as a whole does not care about anymore. I still remember God of War's announcement with a live orchestra playing the shit out of that main theme. It was incredible. And for Tsushima, I remember them bringing Cornelius Boots, a white man who happened to be the master of a traditional Japanese instrument, which retarded SJWs tried to call him out on for culturally appropriating and tried to cancel him, and were immediately laughed at when an expert corrected them on the fact that he was a distinguished master of that instrument, one of the very few left, and how it was an honor for another culture to see someone invest so much time to perform it respectfully and skillfully. See, this is how things should have remained. We should have never fed the egos of these freaking prudish freaks who scream "trigger" at every little thing. We should have never given them the amount of power that we did. We should have laughed them out of every single time that they tried to pull their fucking "I'm offended" cards. But instead, we began tolerating this nonsense and treating them like marginalized little victims when in reality they're more privileged than the average person. Anyway, it is what it is. Slow and steadily, we will regain our sense of normality again, as more and more people lose their fear of speaking out against this nonsense and putting their foot down on intolerable matters. As for Sony and their brand, whatever happens, happens. I'll be here hoping for the best, but honestly, expecting the worst at this point. There is no point in being hopeful and positive until they give us a reason to be positive and hopeful. We'll definitely have to keep our eyes out for any anti-consumer nonsense that they will inevitably push on us because of the financial damage that they're about to accrue while going forward with putting these ideologies at the forefront of their studios as their games degrade. No doubt it will impact the price of the PS6, just like Concord's massive fucking failure impacted the egregious price of this new PS5 Pro. But anyway, until then, please smash that like button and subscribe for more before the DEI overlords take over this channel by force and make me pump out gay, girly content to diversify my demographics into a more modern audience. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.